What is up, my friends? Hope everybody is doing well. Should have some people logging on here, hopefully sooner versus later. But for the handful of you that are already here, I appreciate it. Thanks for popping on. I'm going to drop a link here into the chat. If you're interested in attending my Complete Coach Seminar in Chicago, it is coming up June 21st, 22nd, 23rd. It's going to be an awesome weekend. We are going to learn a lot. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's just going to be an amazing weekend all around. So if you are interested, please go ahead, click that link in the chat, check it out. I believe there's a $100 discount leading up to it. So yeah, I think May 1st is maybe the cutoff for that. So if you're interested, would love to have you there. If you are here and you have questions, this is an open forum. Whatever questions you want to have answered, drop them in the chat. I will just answer them to the best of my ability in the order that I receive them. But man, this is your guys' show. I'm here for 45 minutes. Anything that I can answer for you, I would be happy to take on. So fire away. Hopefully some of you have something prepared. If not, I can just sit here and monologue and riff for the next 45 minutes, but I don't think anybody wants me to do that. So any questions, any concerns, things you're struggling with, training, coaching, we could talk Marvel movies, Star Wars, favorite adult beverages. I'm an open book, so whatever you guys want to talk about, let me know. In the meantime, I will just give a shout out to Scott Charlin, who hosted an amazing event this past weekend. I was in Fort Wayne. It had been a hot minute since I'd done kind of like a bigger seminar. A lot of the stuff that I do now is smaller, a little bit more intimate, multi-day. But this was an awesome event, man. Got my CEUs here, feeling good about myself. Certificate of completion, 0.5 CEUs for the 2024 Northeast Indiana Sports Performance Clinic. So shout out to Scott for putting that on. And actually this week's upcoming podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of attending the course or attending the event, because I think this is something that, look, we've kind of been deconditioned to do. 2020, the scars are still there. We still are kind of in this comfort zone of doing everything behind a screen or doing online courses and online content. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes getting to a physical course can be tough, especially if you're older, you have kids. Travel might be a cumbersome detail for you. But I think now more than ever, we need to get back into the gym. We need to get back into these live events where we can be more interactive, because we all know, you can learn a ton from the presenter, right? And you can learn a ton from listening to somebody speak and taking meticulous notes. But the real benefit to going to those types of events is the energy that you get from being in the room. It's from being around these people in an interactive environment where you can have back and forth. Whether it's a lunch break, whether it's drinks at the bar that night, that's where a lot of the real magic and the real learning happens. So a little sneak peek into this week's podcast, but I would definitely recommend, if it's not on your radar already, try and find some good in-person events to attend. So Thanasis says, "Hey, Mike, I'm very interested on how you apply Bill's model, specifically when an athlete requires a lot of reverse engineering. Would he first go through Bill and then join you in the gym, where you keep applying this according to his athletic needs?" Okay. So yeah, obviously Bill is incredibly smart. I use a lot of pieces from his biomechanical framework, but really it depends on where this athlete is at in the process. So whether it's rehab, whether it's training, I would say the further they are on the rehab end of the spectrum, the more time and energy they're going to spend with Bill or Eric, in this case, who's also a PT at the gym now. They're going to kind of drive the show early on. So if somebody is, let's just say something like a long-term recovery, like an ACL, generally they're acute rehab. So the initial recapturing range of motion, swelling reduction, basic quad strengthening, the isolative stuff, that's generally done off site. That's not something we try and do a lot of at IFAST, just because we're a cash-based model. We don't take insurance, and a lot of that stuff is better suited to some of the big kind of facilities because it's very script-based. Now, once they've got through that initial time period, then they are going to probably start in with Bill or with an Eric. And especially early on in that process, I want them to drive the show because there's still medical check boxes or things that need to be checked off while I'm doing what I need to be doing in the gym. And then as they progress further and further, obviously they would see Bill or Eric for check-ins and they'd have an understanding as to, okay, they're looking great, they're moving in the right direction. And I would progress them into like the reconditioning and return to sport type part of that program. But that's generally how we do it at the gym. The earlier they are in the process, the more acute they are, the more the medical physical therapy side will drive the show. And as they get further and further out, that's where I tend to take the reins. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is what we look at it as. And the way I try and frame it with a lot of my athletes is that, look, it sucks that you've had this injury, right? And I was thinking about just in the last 12 months, I've had a Liz Frank, like compound ankle and foot, like fractures and issues that I've dealt with, an ACL, multiple cases of patellar tendinopathy, like every basketball player I work with, a microfracture, an ACL microfracture. So I've had a lot of these more complex rehabs here lately. And so those people, they need the acute stuff, but you're absolutely right, Thanasis. They need this reverse engineering, right? Because what they're doing isn't working. Their preferred biomechanical movement strategies aren't working, or they're not optimal for them. And therefore they're having a lot of this repeated tissue breakdown. So yeah, I kind of look at it as we work hand in hand, and they have their goals, and they kind of tell me, they being Bill and Eric, these are the things we're seeing. These are the things we want you to work on. I think most importantly, one of the best things they do, or they say, hey, like, here are some things we really want you to stay away from. And that's actually really valuable, because what that does is it gives me a framework of, okay, these things are off the table, but then everything else that I like or enjoy, or things that I think would fit well with this athlete, are in, right? Or at least there's a shot for inclusion there. So that's kind of the way that we approach it, and that's the way that I think about it. It seems to be working really well. I mean, again, we've had some tough cases the past couple months. A couple guys and gals in particular where, they were slow. The process took longer than I would have expected. And part of that too is working with a lot of international athletes now. It was almost easier when a lot of the basketball players that I worked with were domestic, whether they were in the NBA or they were in the G League. But just fact of the matter is, you make a lot more money overseas than you do in the G League. So, if you go overseas and if you get injured over there and you're working with a foreign doctor, now there's all these other issues, right? As far as just, getting interpretations of MRIs, getting feedback from the club, because now sometimes the club has their perspective on when this athlete should be ready and what's best for the athlete. So that adds a whole nother layer of complexity into the mix. But kind of rambling at this point, but hopefully, Thanasis, that gives you an idea as to kind of our continuum of care at IFAST. And whenever the athlete is more acute, in a more rehabilitative state, then Bill and Eric are going to drive the show. And the closer they get to the actual return to their sport or return to competition, that's where I will take the reins and then continually lean on them for check-ins, just to make sure that the athlete is continuing to progress. But I'll take more and more of the onus and the responsibility as the athlete moves forward. So great question, my friend. Hope that helps. For those of you that are popping in now, go ahead. If you got any questions, drop them in the chat. Anything I can do to answer you guys, or any questions, training, maybe not just rehab, training, whatever you guys want to talk about, throw it in there. Let me think. Another thing that I will riff on for a minute, if you guys are here, is the program design mentorship. And I'm not just going to use this as a big pitch fest, but one of the big issues that I've seen in regards to program design, and I was actually going to shoot a short little reel or like a short about it today. But one of the big issues I've seen in program design here lately is this extremism. And I think most of us, probably all of you that are watching this, kind of fit in the middle here. But I'm seeing this extremism where on one side, people are totally focused on just like the big picture, right? Like they don't care at all about the details. It's big picture. It's, oh, as long as my athletes are power cleaning, squatting, and bench pressing, they're good. And they're doing that every day in the gym. There's very little focus on or attention to detail. They're not filling in gaps. They're doing the same thing repeatedly ad nauseum and expecting the athlete to get better. So there's like that end of the spectrum. And I also think of that end of the spectrum as like the outputs at any cost. Like our only goal is to get higher numbers on our record board. And on the other end of the spectrum, and I'm seeing more of this now, is this kind of snooty approach to program design, right? I don't know if it's super practical, but these people that are like so locked in on the details, they're missing the forest for the trees. And, you know, maybe you wrote a goblet front foot elevated split squat and they're like, oh, well, if you didn't do a, you know, front foot elevated split squat with a right hand offset and an inhale down and a 5-second eccentric with a 3-second iso and a 2-second overcoming action, you're doing it wrong, right? And so I think what we need to do, and the best program designers that I've worked with and that I've interacted with constantly are able to contrast between these two ends of the spectrum. They see the big picture, the 30,000 foot view of, okay, this is where my client or athlete is at. These are some of the big things that we need to focus on, or the adaptations that we're chasing. And then on the other end, they also have this willingness and this understanding that the details do matter, right? The exercise that I choose impacts how an athlete is going to move. Choosing an appropriate set rep scheme, time under tension, rest period, intensity, all of these things matter as well. But they're constantly ping-ponging between the two. They're not like just on this one end where it's outputs at any cost. And then it's not at this other end where like perfect movement is the solution to everything. And this is one of the things that I try and, you know, really break down in my mentorship. I'll put a link in here somewhere because there's an application you need to fill out. But I think that's what the best program designers do. They're constantly ping-ponging back and forth between big picture, what does this athlete need? How can I help them get it? And then, okay, what are the details necessary to create that adaptation, to get the response that I want? And then once they've done that, then they come back over here. Okay, now that we've done this thing, what's the next big thing? What's the next big rock that we need to take on? So if you haven't checked it out, I mean, I always tell people, if you haven't done the cert, do the Complete Coach Cert first. It's a great place to get started. It's going to give you a foundation. And it's basically like, once you have a NASM or an NSCA or an ISSA cert, once you've got one of those, then take the Complete Coach Cert, because it'll help you just better integrate this stuff. And I think in a lot of ways, it's a little bit more practical than some of the more textbook focused certs. And then from there, if you really want to dive into program design after you've done the Complete Coach Cert, then the program design mentorship would be a great option. Okay, so Thanasis says, thanks for the detailed reply, Mike. I was always interested, given the uniformity of the model, how a trainer and a physical therapist combines their efforts. Thanks again. You're welcome, man. I think this is what good return to play should look like. And that's what I talked about in my presentation this weekend, Thanasis, is trying to find ways to get everybody on the same page. And, you know, if you're in like a major sports club, right? Like if you work in the NBA, the MLS, MLB, I know how a lot of these high performance departments work is that the first thing you do when you come in the morning is you have like a team meeting and you talk about all the athletes. And if it's a return to play athlete, you've got all the stakeholders in there, right? You got the PT or chiro, massage therapist, strength coach, nutrition expert. You've got all these people kind of giving their input as to where the athlete's at and what they need to be working on. So if you're in that kind of environment, that's great. I'm not. So one of the things that's very important to me is when we're doing return to play with an athlete is having this line of communication, again, with Eric, with Bill. Hey, where's the athlete at? What do we need to be working on? Okay. If I refer them, say, to a massage therapist, because we've got a world-class massage therapist named Jenny Owens. Shout out to Jenny if she ever sees this. But I'm communicating with her like, hey, here are the things that we're working on. Here's some areas we'd like you to maybe address, but then please give us feedback. Like, what are you finding? What are some areas that we might have missed? And I think that's what good return to play looks like, is that, you know, there's like this holistic approach, but it also gives each stakeholder the autonomy to work in their own respective wheelhouse and get the best result. So Thanasis, again, great question. Bo Matthias, man, I just had your brother in the gym, dude. So first off, thanks for coming on here. So Bo wants to know, how do you balance between keeping the program fun to keep clients engaged while still keeping them consistent, basic, and progressive exercises? Man, this is a great question. And I think this is so important because a lot of times people assume that just because we focus on the compound lifts or that we focus on good movement quality, that everything we do is boring. And so I think there's a couple ways you can do this. Number one, I like to think of progressions within progressions, or lateralization, some people might call it. But let's say we're working on, say, a goblet squat, right? We just want to try and improve somebody's squatting pattern. Well, maybe we are going to start with a goblet squat for 4 weeks, 6 weeks. The next month, if possible, maybe I'm going to move to a 2 kettlebell front squat. So looks and feels very, very similar. And I can recreate almost an identical load, right? So now it's just a little bit of a difference going from this posture to this posture, but it's enough variety. It's enough like mental stimulus to keep that client or that athlete happy. So I think just finding like those little micro progressions or lateralizations is huge. It will help increase buy-in. Changing around little things like set and rep schemes, like instead of, just straight 12s forever, hey, let's do a month of 10s or 8s. If they're moving well, maybe we could do a month of like 6s and we chase a little bit of strength focus. So I think that's one thing. But I also think beyond just like the exercise progressions, a big part of this is how you approach the actual session itself. So for me, I'm always a believer in trying to create just like a fun and engaging environment. And I want the gym to just be something people look forward to. So today, and this is not any fault of Dave, because Spotify can be hit or miss with their playlist, but I came in and it was like a 90s alternative rock playlist and something just super slow and dreary came on. So I went over and I kind of knew who was in the gym. And so I put on like more of like an upbeat classic rock playlist because I knew who was in the gym and who was coming in. And so just something a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more engaging, turned up the volume just a little bit. Now we got a little bit more energy. How you're interacting with people, what is your energy level like? If you're super low and melancholy, I like to call them Eeyores, or sometimes people call them energy vampires. You don't want to be one of those people as a coach. So finding ways to just increase the energy in the gym, get people switched on. So between the things that you do to the environment and then the exercises that you coach and cue, I think if you can marry those two things, you can make it a lot more fun and a lot more engaging. And then the final thing I'll leave you with, Bo, is one of the biggest reasons that people seek novelty is that it's not just because they inherently need it. Some people do. But I think a big part of it is that they don't understand why they're doing stuff, right? And part of that is on us. I talk about this in the cert. I talk about it every chance I get, quite frankly, is that helping people understand the context behind the exercise selection or behind your program. So if we're doing a goblet squat, I would describe a goblet squat like the X's and O's of it the same almost across the board. But the context to somebody that wants to, like a stay-at-home mom who wants to get rid of their, post-baby fat, whatever, right? Because those are people that come into our gym. So they want to lose the 15 or 20 pounds after they had their baby. Okay, great. The way I'm going to describe a goblet squat to that person is different than the bodybuilder who's got a back injury that wants to get back to building big showy muscles. That's going to be different than how I describe it to a young athlete who wants to jump higher and run faster. So I think giving them context behind the exercises, maybe why is the squat pattern so important for this person? Help them understand it. And then if you can help them better understand it, how it relates to their goals, inherently, you're going to get more buy-in and you'll have a longer period of time where you can have them focus on those basic foundational lifts. So, Bo, really hope that helped you out there, man. It's something that absolutely took me a little while to come to grips with, because there are just a certain segment of the population that need novelty, right? They want to do new stuff all the time. They're constantly shifting their goals or the things that they want to get out of coming in the gym. And I respect that. But I will also say sometimes too, like if you're doing all the right things and it's just not getting through to them, sometimes those just aren't the best clients for you, right? Because if you're trying to do things what we interpret to be the right way, you're building good movement patterns, sound progressive overload principles, just trying to really help this person level up, and they are not jiving with that, there's somebody at like the big box gym down the road that will literally just give them a different workout every day in an effort to smash them. And if that's what that person needs and that keeps them in the gym, that's fine. That's just not how we choose to do it. So that would be my final answer there, is that if you're doing all the right things and it's just not resonating with this person, maybe they're not the right person for you. So again, Bo, great question, man. Hope that helps a little bit, and it's something that many of us have struggled with over the years. So, okay, man, already 20 minutes in. Feel like hopefully I'm not rambling too much, but we got 45, so we got 25 more minutes. Feel free, keep firing stuff at me. Man, what else was I thinking about? Try and think of any other good topics that I was chatting about. We were talking a little bit about reverse engineering clients. And I think this is something that's very important. I talked about this in the return to play presentation. But when you're thinking about return to play, one of the most important things you can do is reverse engineering the sport. And I have this slide up where I had like a professional basketball player, professional football player, professional soccer player. And this is where, yeah, some of the foundational stuff like a squat, a lunge, a hinge, a push, a pull, like all those things are important. But when you start really getting into the nitty gritty, if you want to get somebody at peak levels of fitness for their respective sport, you have to understand that sport. So for instance, in basketball, you got to think lots of starting and stopping, probably never hitting top end because a basketball court is too short. A lot of stress on the hips, knees, and ankles, short bursts interspersed with maybe some continuous running with some rest. So the energy systems demands for basketball are going to be totally different than, say, a professional football player. Because I had a couple of these guys in over the years, and you got to think about the energy systems demands. They are totally different, right? Now you have huge human beings running into each other for 4 to 6 seconds at a time, 25 to 30 seconds off, and they could do that for as few as 2 or 3 plays up to as many as 12, after which they are followed by a break. So I think this is one of the big things that we need to do as an industry. I think people at the top of the food chain are doing this because they are specialized. But if you are a younger coach listening to this and you work with a broad spectrum of athletes, different shapes, different sizes, different sports, really invest some time in trying to understand the game, understand the movements involved, the areas of the body that might break down, the conditioning needs necessary. And if you haven't already picked it up, Joel Jamieson's Ultimate MMA Conditioning book is, I think it's maybe $30. And it's arguably the most impactful conditioning book I've ever read, because it's just incredibly practical. It's not focused on endurance or improving like running or swimming or cycling, these long duration endurance sports. It's like the most applicable book you can get for real world energy systems training. So if you haven't read that book, definitely check it out. But definitely think about reverse engineering the different sports if you work with a lot of different athletes. Okay. Oh, okay. ATA Excellence Martial Arts wants to know, can you talk about the format and content of your speed camps for youth? Yes, this is a great question. And I actually did an entire podcast on this a while back. But so for me, I love these speed camps. Number one, I get time with my daughter, which is like kind of a bonus. This was my way early on of getting her to come in the gym and start training. I made it fun, right? I got her and I invited a bunch of her friends. So the gym made a little bit of money, which I always invested back into like gym equipment or equipment that we needed, stuff that was necessary in the gym. But my biggest priority here was teaching. We had some boys, but a lot of times young girls, 10 to 13, how to move, right? How to be more confident in the gym. So the program kind of looked like this. The first 5 minutes, so like if they came in early or the first 5 minutes were absolutely free time. I wanted them to run around. I wanted them to find stuff that was engaging to them. Last year, they were obsessed with flag tag, like obsessed with flag tag. They wanted to do that every day to start the session, which was great. This year, I had all the girls played soccer, right? So my only rule for the warm-up was that they couldn't play soccer. They had to do something else because they were already having practice twice a week. So I said, whatever you do, you can't play soccer, but you can do anything else. So they were obsessed with playing volleyball, getting buckets. They would just move around and have fun. So that's like the first 5 minutes. The second 5 minutes was just kind of a general warm up, like a general dynamic warm up. And again, I shot like a YouTube video about this a couple weeks ago that was just kind of the general warm up that I use with my athletes. And it's basic, it's foundational, but exposes them to almost all of the big movement patterns they're going to use in sport, right? There's a mobility component to it and stability because we do a lot of stuff on one leg, but then it's, hey, let's do some sprinting. Let's do some shuffling. Let's do some backpedaling. Karaoke is just trying to expose them to a broad range of movements, but kind of subtly there. My thought process is also if they ever get in a situation where they're going to do a rec sport or they're going to go play and the coach isn't there, they have a warm up baked in that they're comfortable with that they can take and apply. So we do that. And then generally the next 25 minutes was focused on one key area. Okay, so, I had themes for the day. Sometimes it was acceleration, like linear acceleration. Some days it was curvilinear runs, right? Or curved running. Some days it was change of direction. So in a lot of cases, what I would do is I would start by teaching them the movement, right? The movement model, what it should look like. I always tried to give them like 2 or 3 cues. Okay, so for example, if they're doing linear acceleration, I tried to beat this in their head because they play soccer. There's a lot of accelerations involved. I said 3 cues that you always need to think about. Chase your shoulders, big arms, right? And push. Those were the 3. And so I just beat that into them over like the 2 or 3 months that we did this. So eventually now, one of the girls, it's funny, she's like, anytime I go after a ball, I think about Coach Mike and I think about chasing my shoulders, which is pretty cool. So we'd spend like 25 minutes and we would do some drills, for lack of a better term, but some concepts and some activities that would help reinforce the movement model. And then we would always find ways to compete. So maybe we're doing a relay. Maybe we're doing, I call them waterfall sprints, where one girl goes, and then once she goes, the rest of the line can react and run out. So we would do that for 20 to 25 minutes. And then if you're doing the math here, that gives them 20 to 25 minutes on the back end. I was really focused on giving them some foundational strength training. And again, I always have to relay this to parents because the girls this year were 6th and 7th grade. And so I want them to understand this is not about getting them in the gym and turning them into powerlifters. I want to teach them how to squat effectively, how to lunge effectively, how to do a push-up, what real core training should look and feel like, getting them confident in like doing chin-ups. So we would put a band in the rack and we would have them start working on chin-ups. And so again, kind of the thought process here is twofold. Number one, getting them ready because at some point they are going to be in a large group environment, probably at their school in a weights or advanced PE class, and they're going to have to do these things. So I want me to be their first exposure versus a high school weight room where there's 60 other kids, 1 or 2 coaches. They're putting a barbell on their back. They're around all their friends. That's not the best environment to learn how to lift. So I wanted to give them that foundational like S&C piece of this. So even if I never work with them again, they've got a basic understanding of how a squat, a lunge, a hinge, a press, and a pull should feel. But then also there's just the confidence side of it. And I haven't got to talk about this as much, but I think girls at that age, guys too, young boys too, but girls especially, I want Kendall and her friends to have that confidence when they walk into a weight room, that they know what to do, but also when they step on a soccer field, when they're walking around in everyday life, they have that confidence of being able to take care of their own body, right? Because I think that's incredibly empowering for a young female to have that. So I hope that gives you some insight. I don't know what your actual name is there, ATA, but I hope that gives you some insights as to how I ran the camps, why I ran them. Incredibly impactful, I think, for me, maybe even more so than the girls. I just love working with that age group, but definitely something I will do in the future. And it's funny because now Kendall actually really enjoys it. She has like a little body weight workout she's done basically every day in her room since then, like since November or December, every day. The only days she's missed were if she had a soccer tournament or when we were maybe at Camp Tecumseh last weekend. I think those are the only times that she's missed. So she's really locked in. In fact, yesterday, she's, excuse me, she's playing tennis. Her tennis match got canceled. She actually asked me if we could go into the gym. So now I'm starting to like layer some new things on, right? Like, hey, here's how to alternating dumbbell bench. So it was a big day yesterday for, because everything they do is bilateral. And, she's used to just cranking out push-ups, but giving them dumbbells, making them stabilize and control one arm at a time, that was a challenging task for her. So it's going to be fun. I just kind of told her, the next, as she's in 7th grade, she'll move into 8th grade next year, especially over the summer. We're going to get in there like twice a week, and we're going to put in some work and just kind of really help to build her body and in part build her confidence to see what she can do, not only on a soccer pitch, but just in life. Because last thing on this topic, this is one of the big things that I would pitch when we did not only these camps, but when we ran our athletic development classes at IFAST, is that like, look, if we're just being realistic, like 2% of kids are going to get a college scholarship. So does that mean that strength training isn't valuable to the rest of them? I think what we're doing is even more impactful for them later in life, because now they know for the rest of their life how to take care of their body. When they go to college, they know how to get into a weight room and they're comfortable, they're confident. They know how to do all the basic core movements. So I think there's a lot of power in teaching them at a young age. They've got the mobility, they can move really well. They haven't just been landlocked yet like we have. We're stuck at desks all day. So the younger we can get them started and give them that strong foundation, I think the more powerful and the more impactful it can be. So great question. Great question. Gary, great to hear from you, my friend. It says, Mike, what is your acute approach to the client who presents with lumbar issues before intense activity? Yeah, this is a tough one. When somebody comes in and they've got lower back pain right out of the gate, there's a couple approaches and things that you could do here, Gary, that I think would be helpful. Number one would be trying to resolve at least some of that right out of the gate. So if you have not seen my ground prep series on the YouTubes, I think there's 2 versions, an older version and then one where I'm actually taking Luca through it. That's probably the better one because there's more coaching cues. It's a little bit more robust. I've added some things to it over the years, but I really like that series. And I know Luca would tell you, he's had some back issues over the years. That is nothing that he's tried to hide, but he's had some stuff over the years. And I think he does that almost every day before his training sessions now because he loves how it feels. So I would say starting them with the ground prep series could be a big thing. If they come in and they are very acute, but they still want to get some work in, one of the things that I would suggest, and talked about this a bunch, I've shot YouTubes about it, but I call this the reverse workout. So if you look at how a normal workout might look, it's big bang compound stuff first, and then we have our supplemental lifts, and then we have our accessories. And so what I would do for these people, and I've had to do it numerous times, especially when I had clients in lower back pain, is I just invert the workout. So maybe now, instead of starting with a squat or a push-up or a bench press, now I'm going to start with a core exercise and a half kneeling activity. And if they get through that and they're like, okay, back still feels good. Okay, now we're going to go to the second piece. And maybe that is a push-up and a split squat or a step up. Because again, a lot of times these involve less loading. They tend to be offset or asymmetrical or, activities that aren't like big bang compound lifts, like bilateral symmetrical stuff, like your squats, your deads, your bench presses, your pull-ups. So a lot of times those are generally pretty well received. And then it just comes down to, okay, if we've done those activities and we've gotten through those unscathed, now is there any variation of the compound lifts that they can do without pain? And that's where I think just being smart about stuff. So like there was a guy in the gym yesterday and he's had some lower back issues. He just said, it was funny. He's like, man, I was trying to figure out how I could bench press without lower back pain. And I typed that into Google and you were the first thing that came up. And there was like a YouTube video. I'm like, yeah. So there's a couple options there. If you want to do like a bench press, you can start by maybe putting their feet up on a bench. If that doesn't do it, you could start with maybe a floor press variation, right? Knees bent. That way the back is flat on the floor. There's very little, extension through that lower back. They've got less likelihood of really like arching and compressing through the lower back, which tends to be very provocative. So, reverse engineering that workout or inverting the workout and then finding activities, again, maybe it's a feet elevated bench press or a floor press Maybe it's an anteriorly loaded squat, right? Again, I don't know what kind of activities you're doing, but hey, maybe we go with an anterior loaded squat variation, goblet, 2 kettlebells, zerker, plate reaching, so I would start with that. And if all of those things, like, let's just say that's just not working, one of the things I like to do is we'll do ground prep. We'll do a good extensive warm up. Maybe we can do something like a backward sled drag. Maybe that's something that allows them to kind of create some space on the backside. It allows them to continue to train, feel like they're doing stuff without irritating their back. Or another option is to just do all your warm up stuff. And then, hey, let's just do some really light, low intensity cardio. It's not the most exciting thing, but getting the blood flowing, improving their aerobic capacity in a lot of cases can help just make them feel better and ultimately fast track them and get them back into the gym sooner. So, man, Gary, that was a really good question. Something I have dealt with a lot myself over the years. But I would start with some of those things. I really like that inverse workout or that reverse workout. I've used it so many times. And most people are really shocked because the other great thing about that is, okay, let's say you do those things, right? And somebody's very anteriorly oriented, right? Big anterior pelvic tilt. But you start now with some core activities and you do some half kneeling. You start to get their pelvis back underneath them. And then again, maybe you do some push-ups. So you shift their center of gravity back. You're doing a front foot elevated split squat, which again, shifts their center of gravity back and kind of improves their ability to separate those hips. So their spine and their pelvis aren't moving as just like one concrete block. Well, now they just feel better overall. And now they can go and do some of those compound activities, maybe with some modifications or with some lighter loads. And it makes a big impact, right? They can go in and they can do that stuff relatively pain-free. So, man, Gary, great question there. Really good stuff and super practical. Like that's one thing I've been thinking a lot about these days is it's really easy to get lost in the weeds on the internet. Like the vast majority of us, the 80 to 90% of us that are in the gym, that are trying to do good work, we realize like there's a practical element to all this, right? Do you want to nerd out to the utmost extreme at times? Absolutely. That's how you level up your knowledge base. That's how you become a better practitioner. But again, like just diving into the weeds for the sake of, being like an internet expert or just trolling people for content is really frustrating. And it's frustrating when I see that because I think most of us understand like the best trainers, the people that are trying to do high level work understand there's nuance, but there's a practical element to everything that we do. And we don't coach in a vacuum. We don't write programs in a vacuum. And we've all written what we thought was the perfect program, right? Absolutely ideal for this person. And then it fails miserably because we were so focused on the program itself, we forgot about the human that we were writing the program for. So never forget that element of practicality when we're writing programs. Gary, you're welcome, man. I hope that helped. Man, if you guys have anything else, I got probably time for one more. I really overbooked myself today. I knew I wanted to do this, so I had this on my schedule and my calendar. But then, I don't know, also have like 4 Zoom calls immediately after this in rapid succession. I've got one of my basketball guys in the gym, so I got a jet in there. But yeah, man, this is always fun. I appreciate you guys coming on here. Like I said, if you guys think of it, we got time for at least one more as well. I hope you guys are enjoying the YouTube content as a whole. This has just been an interesting experience. Paul is the video guy and podcast guy that helps me with all this. We go back and forth on this a lot, and I try and remind myself that I'm a coach that creates content, not a content creator that just creates content for a living. So it's been interesting because, you have the hip mobility video, which you go and you look at that. I don't know who promoted that for me. Whoever did, thank you. But that has like 321,000 views versus my sumo deadlift video, which I thought, man, like I deadlifted a decent amount of weight. I thought it was a good breakdown, good tutorial. It's got like 350 views. So I've definitely not cracked the algorithm yet. I don't know exactly what I need to be doing, but if you are here, hopefully that means you're enjoying the content. And man, I just told Paul, we're going to just keep doing this, man. We're just going to keep plugging away at it. I'm going to do my best to create content that's relevant, practical, and valuable for you. So I really hope you're enjoying it and that it's making you a little bit better trainer and coach as well. Well, I have one other thing that I will talk about unless somebody has a question. One of the things that you guys know I am passionate about and excited about is, I'm double gearing here because I got the IFAST and the IFAST basketball on today. But something I'm really passionate about is helping young basketball players. And by extension, I'm only one person and I can't train all of the young basketball players in the world. So something that I'm working on behind the scenes that will hopefully open in the next one, at most 2 months, is what I call IFAST Basketball Insiders. So if you are a private sector high school strength coach, collegiate strength coach that works with basketball players and wants to learn from myself as well as other industry experts, I'm very excited about this project. So it's going to be very cool. Essentially, there's going to be monthly content drops where we're going to talk about things that are relevant to helping basketball players, whether it's conditioning, whether it's coming back off of injuries, return to play protocols, gaining weight, all the things that are relevant to young up and coming basketball players dealing with knee injuries or ankle injuries. These are going to be a lot of the topics that are covered. So we're going to have monthly content drops. I'm going to do a monthly Q&A on Circle, which is just kind of like Zoom, except it's its own platform. You'll have access to me via Q&A. It's going to be a really sick little setup and a sick little program because, man, I just see a lot of room for improvement, if I'm being honest. And I understand, if you're in a high school, it's hard. You don't have the resources. There's not enough manpower. But when I just see basketball players for 4 years getting served up a steady diet of power cleans, back squats, and bench presses, and it's the same program the football players are doing and the same program the soccer players are doing, it's really frustrating to me because I feel like as an industry, we can do so much better. So if you are in the basketball space, again, primarily for like private sector, high school, and collegiate strength coaches that work in the basketball world, I think you're going to be very excited. My goal is to just make this the best possible site and resource for coaches like you. So let that out of the bag now. Pretty pumped to do that. And man, my friends, I think that's probably pretty good, man. I don't have any more questions. I appreciate all of you for coming out here today. I love doing stuff like this. The Q&A podcasts are fun, but I do enjoy this kind of thing too. It's a little bit more live, a little bit more interactive, and just appreciate all of you, not just for coming on, but for what you're trying to do for our industry. We need more leaders. We need more people that are willing to continue to learn, to evolve. And as you do this longer and longer, I know a couple of you personally, look, the longer you do this, the more you need to think about mentoring and finding young people to give back to, because our industry desperately needs more high-level coaches, trainers, physical therapists, people that are trying to do this at a high level to then turn around and mentor the next generation of coaches. Because, man, I feel pretty young, 45, a little bit more gray in the beard than I would like. But, man, I still enjoy this every single day, but I know I can't do it forever. And so I'm just really compelled to try and lift up this next generation of coaches. So for all of you that came on, love and appreciate you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the support. And until next time, hope you guys are doing well, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.